In this episode, we are turning to a topic that feels distant to many beginners until they realize how often organizations rely on other people, other companies, and other systems to make their own technology work. And that topic is supply chain risk and integrity. At first glance, a supply chain may sound like something limited to shipping boxes or manufacturing hardware. But in cybersecurity and auditing, it is much broader than that. It includes software providers, cloud services, device makers, contractors, data processors, support partners, and the many dependencies an organization may barely notice until one of them fails or becomes untrustworthy. That matters because an organization can build strong internal controls and still suffer harm when a supplier introduces weakness, tampering, delay, fraud, poor security, or hidden dependence. Evaluating supply chain risk and integrity issues means asking whether the organization understands who and what it depends on, whether those dependencies are being reviewed intelligently, and whether trust is being supported by evidence instead of assumption. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A helpful place to begin is with the plain meaning of supply chain in an information technology (IT) context. In this setting, the supply chain is the network of outside sources, processes, products, and services that contribute to the technology, data, operations, and digital capabilities an organization uses. That may include a company that manufactures network equipment, a vendor that develops business software, a provider that hosts applications, a firm that performs maintenance, or a distributor that delivers hardware components to data centers and offices. The chain can also include less visible links, such as subcontractors, managed service providers, external code libraries, and support vendors that have privileged access into systems. Once you see the topic this way, the central concern becomes easier to understand. If any important link in that chain is weak, compromised, dishonest, poorly controlled, or unavailable, the organization depending on it may experience security problems, operational disruption, compliance failures, or loss of trust even if its own staff did not make a direct mistake. The word integrity is especially important here because it adds depth beyond simple availability or cost concerns. Integrity refers to trustworthiness, accuracy, completeness, and protection against improper alteration, substitution, or manipulation. When auditors evaluate supply chain integrity, they are asking whether the products, services, data, and supporting processes entering the organization can be relied upon to be what they claim to be and to perform as expected without hidden compromise. A device may arrive on time and still present an integrity issue if it was altered before delivery. A software update may improve features but create serious integrity concerns if the code source, development process, or delivery path cannot be trusted. Even a support provider may raise integrity questions if the organization cannot verify who is accessing systems, what changes are being made, or whether approved procedures are being followed consistently. This is why supply chain evaluation is not only about continuity. It is also about confidence that the organization's dependencies remain authentic, controlled, and suitable for use. Organizations care about supply chain risk because modern technology environments are deeply interconnected. Few companies build everything themselves, and even those with strong internal teams still rely on a wide web of outside relationships and purchased components. This interdependence creates efficiency and speed, but it also creates exposure. A business may depend on one vendor for identity services, another for cloud infrastructure, another for endpoint tools, and still others for development components, business applications, logistics support, and incident response. Each dependency can bring value, but each also creates a path through which weakness may enter. The organization might be affected by a supplier's poor security, a contractor's negligence, a counterfeit part, a flawed update, a labor disruption, a geopolitical event, or a hidden concentration of reliance on a single provider. Auditors therefore examine supply chain issues because the organization's true risk environment often extends well beyond its own walls. What matters is not only what the company directly controls, but also what it trusts and how thoughtfully that trust is managed. One of the first lessons for beginners is that supply chain risk is not a single type of problem. It includes many categories that interact with one another. There is operational risk, where a supplier fails to deliver needed goods or services on time. There is security risk, where a provider or component introduces vulnerabilities, unauthorized access, malware, or unsafe practices. There is quality risk, where products or services do not perform consistently or accurately enough for business needs. There is legal and compliance risk, where data handling, sourcing practices, or contractual obligations do not meet required standards. There is financial risk, where a supplier becomes unstable or can no longer support the relationship. There is also concentration risk, where too much dependence is placed on one source, one region, or one type of provider. An effective evaluation recognizes that these risks overlap. A delayed delivery can become a security issue if old systems remain in use longer. A compliance gap can become a reputation problem. A single supplier failure can quickly spread across operations, controls, and customer trust. A common misconception is that supply chain risk begins only after something is purchased or deployed. In reality, risk often begins much earlier, during selection and sourcing. If an organization does not understand what it is buying, who is providing it, what hidden dependencies exist, or what level of assurance is needed, then weakness enters before the relationship even starts. Strong organizations define their needs carefully, identify the sensitivity and criticality of the item or service, and perform due diligence that matches the level of impact the supplier could have. They do not assume that all suppliers deserve identical treatment, but they also do not allow critical relationships to proceed on reputation alone. Auditors want to know whether supply chain review is risk-based and whether the organization distinguishes between routine purchases and dependencies that could materially affect operations or security. Good sourcing decisions reduce future surprises. Weak sourcing decisions often create long-term problems that become harder to correct once systems are implemented, contracts are signed, and operations become dependent on the supplier. Visibility is another central concept, because organizations cannot manage supply chain risk well if they do not know what is in the chain or how deeply those elements are connected to critical business functions. Many businesses can name their largest vendors, but have far less visibility into supporting subcontractors, embedded software components, maintenance providers, or regional dependencies that affect service delivery. This limited visibility becomes dangerous when incidents occur, because the organization may struggle to determine where exposure exists or which services are affected. Evaluating supply chain integrity, therefore, includes asking whether the organization maintains reasonable knowledge of its important suppliers, the products and services they support, the data they handle, the access they receive, and the downstream relationships that may introduce additional risk. Perfect visibility is rarely possible, especially in complex environments, but reasonable visibility is a major sign of maturity. When management cannot identify key dependencies, it is difficult to assess criticality, monitor changes, or respond quickly when external events raise concern about a particular supplier, technology component, or region. Software supply chain issues deserve special attention because they can feel invisible compared with physical goods, yet they affect nearly every organization using modern applications and services. Software may contain code created internally, purchased from vendors, incorporated from third-party components, maintained by outside developers, and updated through automated processes. That means trust is spread across many hands and many stages. A weakness can appear through insecure development, hidden malicious code, poorly reviewed dependencies, compromised update processes, or insufficient testing before release. For beginners, the important idea is not to memorize every technical pathway. The important idea is to understand that software does not arrive from nowhere and that its origin, maintenance path, and update process all matter. Auditors evaluating supply chain integrity in software-related environments ask whether the organization understands where important software comes from, how updates are validated, how high-risk changes are reviewed, and whether management appreciates that a trusted application can still become a source of risk if the chain behind it is not governed carefully. Physical supply chain issues remain important as well, especially where hardware, networking equipment, industrial devices, laptops, storage systems, or replacement components are involved. A device may be authentic and still arrive late, damaged, unsupported, or inconsistent with expected specifications. In more serious cases, hardware may be counterfeit, altered, or sourced through channels that weaken confidence in its integrity. Physical logistics also matter because custody, transport, storage, and installation can all affect trust. If equipment passes through poorly controlled hands, if serial tracking is weak, or if receiving procedures are informal, the organization may have difficulty proving that the item installed is the item that was approved and delivered. Auditors therefore look not only at what is purchased, but also at how it moves from source to use. This may involve questions about approved suppliers, receiving controls, asset tracking, inspection practices, documentation, and secure handling. A supply chain is not trustworthy merely because a purchase order exists. Integrity depends on whether the organization can reasonably verify authenticity, condition, and controlled transfer from one stage to another. Third parties and fourth parties complicate the picture further, and this is where many organizations discover that their understanding of dependence is too narrow. A third party is a direct external provider to the organization. A fourth party is a provider used by that third party, often without much visibility to the customer relying on the overall service. For example, a cloud-based business application may depend on another hosting provider, an external support contractor, or a separate data processing service in the background. If one of those additional links fails, the customer organization may still be affected even though it has no direct contract with that supporting provider. Auditors care because many supply chain risks travel through these indirect relationships. An organization may believe it has diversified vendors when in practice several of them depend on the same underlying infrastructure or region. That hidden concentration weakens resilience. Good evaluation, therefore, includes looking for signs that the organization understands critical indirect dependencies and considers whether key suppliers are transparent enough about subcontracting, hosting arrangements, and shared operational reliance. Monitoring is just as important as initial review because supply chain risk changes over time. A supplier that was stable and trustworthy during onboarding may later experience financial trouble, ownership changes, staff reductions, new legal exposure, operational decline, or security incidents. A product that was low risk at first may become more critical after the organization expands its use. A region that seemed stable may become affected by natural disaster, political disruption, or transportation limitations. This means supply chain evaluation cannot be a one-time approval activity. It must include periodic reassessment based on the importance of the supplier and the sensitivity of the dependency. Auditors examine the sensitivity of the dependency. Auditors examine whether the organization revisits critical suppliers, reviews significant changes, monitors performance, tracks incidents, and updates risk assessments when new information appears. They also consider whether the organization notices red flags early enough to respond sensibly. Ongoing monitoring is a sign that management understands trust as something that must be maintained and verified over time, not granted permanently after a single procurement decision. Resilience and contingency planning are closely tied to supply chain evaluation because one of the harshest lessons organizations learn is that a trusted supplier can still become unavailable. The question is not whether every disruption can be prevented, because it cannot. The question is whether the organization has thought realistically about what would happen if a key supplier failed, suffered a breach, experienced legal restrictions, or could no longer deliver on agreed terms. Strong organizations identify critical dependencies, define acceptable downtime or delay, and consider alternate sourcing, substitute components, manual workarounds, inventory strategies, contractual protections, and communication plans. Weak organizations often discover their true dependency only when a failure occurs and there is no practical backup. Auditors pay close attention to this because resilience is one of the clearest tests of whether supply chain risk has been understood seriously. A mature organization does not assume the chain will always hold. It plans for strain, interruption, and recovery, especially where public trust, safety, or essential business services are involved. From an audit perspective, evaluating supply chain risk and integrity issues means looking for both governance and evidence. The auditor may review policies, procurement criteria, vendor risk assessments, contract provisions, inventory records, receiving procedures, security reviews, incident logs, performance reports, and contingency plans. Interviews also matter because they reveal whether responsibilities are understood across procurement, legal, operations, security, and business leadership. A strong environment usually shows risk-based sourcing, reasonable visibility into critical dependencies, documented integrity checks where needed, monitoring over time, and practical contingency thinking. A weak environment often shows fragmented ownership, blind trust in well-known brands, limited awareness of indirect dependencies, and little preparation for supplier disruption or compromise. The auditor is not expecting impossible control over every link in a global technology environment. The real question is whether management has taken sensible, proportionate steps to identify important supply chain exposure and reduce the chance that outside weakness will become internal harm. An equally important part of evaluation is organizational accountability. Supply chain risk sits across many functions, so problems often emerge when everyone assumes someone else owns the issue. Procurement may focus on price and terms, technology teams may focus on functionality, security teams may focus on technical controls, and business leaders may focus on speed and delivery. All of those perspectives matter, but they need coordination. If nobody brings them together, then the organization may approve risky suppliers for urgent business reasons, or may impose controls too late to matter. Auditors therefore consider whether the governance model clearly defines who reviews critical suppliers, who approves exceptions, who tracks dependencies, and who decides when a risk is acceptable or when a relationship needs stronger control. Clear accountability does not eliminate risk, but it does improve the quality and speed of decision-making. Supply chain integrity suffers when oversight is fragmented because gaps appear between selection, deployment, monitoring, and response, and those gaps are often where real failures begin to grow. As we come to the end, the main lesson is that evaluating supply chain risk and integrity issues is really about asking whether the organization understands and governs the trust it places in others. Modern businesses depend on complex networks of providers, products, services, code, and logistics, and those dependencies can strengthen operations or quietly weaken them, depending on how they are managed. Good evaluation looks beyond cost and convenience to consider authenticity, resilience, visibility, concentration, ongoing monitoring, and the practical consequences of failure or compromise. It also recognizes that supply chain risk is not just about what the organization buys, but about what those purchases connect to over time. For an auditor, this area matters because serious disruptions and serious security events often arrive through trusted paths rather than obvious attacks from the outside. When an organization treats supply chain trust as something to be examined, verified, and revisited, it becomes far better prepared to protect operations and respond intelligently when external dependencies are tested.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.